An original podcast from podlatino.com.
There's a question that comes up almost on its own when you think about Hercules. What does someone do with strength that has no limits? The answer the Greek myths give isn't the most obvious one. It's not to conquer, or to dominate, or to pile up victories. It's to carry the weight of what you've done, to face your mistakes honestly, and to keep going when the road ahead looks impossible. The strength of Hercules doesn't start in his arms. It starts in that decision. In the Greek tradition, his name was Heracles, but over centuries, the world came to know him as Hercules, and that's the name that stuck across nearly every culture that ever touched the Greek myths. He was the son of Zeus, the most powerful god on Olympus, and of Alcmena, a mortal woman of noble blood. Hercules came into the world with something very few mortals ever had, a truly extraordinary strength. From childhood, he was different. Not in the way you notice through gestures or words, but in the way his body responded when the world demanded more than any human being could give. But that same quality that made him exceptional also made him a target for something powerful and hard to escape: the wrath of Hera. The goddess was Zeus's wife, and the existence of Hercules was a constant reminder of her husband's unfaithfulness. Hera wasn't simply a jealous or petty figure. She was a goddess whose dignity had been wounded, and that wound led her to pursue Hercules in ways he couldn't always see coming or prepare for. It didn't make her a monster. It made her a force that worked from the shadows, that waited, that looked for the right moment to make the strongest man in the world stumble over his own nature. And that moment came. Hercules was living with his family, with the people he loved, when Hera intervened in a cruel way. She clouded his mind. She wrapped him in a confusion so deep that he could no longer see what was in front of him. In that state, without understanding what he was doing, he committed a terrible act with no way back. When the fog lifted and reality took shape again, Hercules was left facing the consequences of something his hands had done, but his mind had never chosen. The pain that hit him in that moment wasn't physical. It was the kind of pain that has no precise name, but that settles in your chest and doesn't leave. He sought guidance at the Oracle of Delphi, the place Greeks turned to when questions were too big to answer alone. The response he received was clear. Even if it wasn't easy, he had to place himself in the service of King Eurystheus and carry out whatever the king commanded. Eurystheus was a cousin of Hercules, a man who had never been particularly brave or particularly wise, but who suddenly found himself with the power to give orders to the strongest hero in the world. And he used it. He imposed 12 labors, 12 trials that seemed designed to be impossible. Some thought they were a punishment. Others believed they were an opportunity. Perhaps they were both at the same time. The first came from the north of the Peloponnese. In the forests of Nemea lived a lion that had been terrorizing the region. It was no ordinary animal. Its hide was so tough that no known weapon could pierce it. Hercules went there, tracked it to its lair, and when he finally stood before it, he understood that arrows were useless, that a spear wouldn't work either. So he did what no one else could have done. He used his bare hands. He faced the lion in direct combat. No tools, no distance, just the strength that set him apart from every other mortal. He won, and using the lion's own hide, which turned out to be the finest shield he could have found, he draped it over his shoulders. From that day forward, that image, the hero wearing the skin of the Nemean lion, became inseparable from who he was. The second labor was stranger and harder. In the marshes of Lerna lived the hydra, a creature with multiple heads that couldn't be defeated by brute strength alone. Every time one head was cut off, the wound would grow back, sometimes into two. It was a perfect trap. The more directly you attacked it, the more powerful it became. Hercules arrived with his nephew Iolaus, and together they worked out a solution that strength alone never would have found. Each time a head was removed, Iolaus would immediately cauterize the wound, preventing the creature from regenerating. It was slow, it was hard, but it worked. The hydra fell. And Hercules learned something in that swamp that easier battles never teach. Some enemies demand more than muscle. The labors that followed took him down very different roads. He had to capture alive the Lernaean hind, a deer sacred to Artemis, goddess of the hunt, that ran faster than any creature known. Hercules pursued it for months without giving up, until he finally caught it without causing it harm. Because the task required him to bring it back whole. He had to capture the Erymanthian boar, an enormous beast terrorizing the mountains, and bring it to Eurystheus alive. By some accounts, when Hercules arrived with the boar, the king was so frightened he hid inside a large jar. He had to obtain the belt of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons, legendary warriors who lived beyond the known edges of the world. He had to capture the wild bull of Crete, tame the mares of Diomedes, a king who fed his animals with human flesh, and steal the cattle of the giant Geryon, a creature with 3 bodies who guarded his herd from the far western edge of the world. But among all the labors, one challenged the hero in a completely different way. Eurystheus ordered him to clean the stables of King Augeas in a single day. Augeas kept thousands of animals, and his stables hadn't been cleaned in decades. The task was so enormous, it seemed like mockery, a way to humiliate the most powerful hero in the world by forcing him to do the most humble work imaginable. But Hercules didn't see it that way. He thought. What he did was redirect the course of 2 rivers so they flowed straight through the stables and cleaned them entirely. He didn't lift a single piece of straw. He used the water, the land, and the landscape. He finished in a day. Eurystheus looked for a technicality to disqualify it, because that was who Eurystheus was. But the story remained, and with it, the idea that some problems can't be solved by charging at them head-on. One of the strangest labors was also one of the longest. Hercules had to travel to the very edge of the known world to find the golden apples of the Hesperides, a place that seemed almost mythical, even within the myths themselves. The garden was guarded by a dragon that never slept, and by the Hesperides themselves, the nymphs who watched over the tree. Along the way, Hercules encountered Atlas, the Titan condemned since the beginning of time to hold the sky on his shoulders. He made a deal with him. Hercules would hold the sky while Atlas went to retrieve the apples. Atlas went, brought them back, and then refused to take up his eternal burden again. Hercules had to think fast. He asked Atlas to hold the sky for just a moment while he adjusted the weight on his own shoulders. The Titan agreed, and Hercules took the apples and walked away. There's something in that story that shows intelligence can outmaneuver even the most powerful. The final labor was the darkest of all, and the one no mortal had ever accomplished before. Eurystheus ordered him to descend into the underworld and bring back Cerberus, the massive 3-headed dog who guarded the entrance to the kingdom of the dead. Cerberus wasn't simply a large animal. He was the guardian of the threshold between the living and the dead, the creature who made sure no one left the underworld without permission. Hercules descended into that shadowy place, spoke with Hades, god of the dead, and asked to borrow the dog temporarily without using any weapons. Hades agreed under that condition. Hercules faced Cerberus, subdued him with his hands, brought him up to the world of the living, and presented him to Eurystheus, who this time couldn't hide fast enough. Then he returned the dog to the underworld, just as he had promised. Keeping his word was part of the trial, too. When the 12 labors were done, Hercules was not the same person who had begun them. Not because his physical strength had faded, but because he had accumulated something that muscles can't explain. The experience of having failed, of having asked for help, of having had to think when strength wasn't enough, of having kept his promises even when no one was forcing him to. He had carried a weight that wasn't the sky of Atlas or the hide of the Nemean lion. It was his own story. The Greeks told this myth not simply to celebrate raw power. They admired it, certainly. But what made Hercules great in the deeper versions of the story wasn't how many monsters he had defeated. It was that he had found a way to keep going after the worst moment of his life. That he had turned guilt into a path forward. That he had learned, through each trial, something he hadn't known before it began. That's what the ancients wanted to hold on to when they spoke his name. That real strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply keeps moving.